The $50,000 prosthetic leg hit the concrete with a sickening crack. Logan Carter lay sprawled across the pristine courtyard of Whitmore Academy, his artificial limb twisted at an impossible angle, sparks literally flying from the damaged electronics. Around him, the children of senators, tech moguls, and oil barons pulled out their phones. This was about to go viral. Timber. Bryce Hawthorne screamed, pumping his fist like he'd just scored the winning touchdown. Did you see that metal freak eat dirt? Blood trickled from Logan's scraped palms. His school blazer, custom-tailored, worth more than most cars, was torn at the elbow. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the sound echoing across the courtyard. Laughter. Cruel, delighted, infectious laughter from 50 of the most privileged children in America. Logan tried to stand, but his prosthetic leg was completely dead. No movement, no response. Just expensive, broken machinery attached to what remained of his real leg. He was trapped on the ground like a turtle flipped on its shell. "Oh my God," squealed Brittany Vanderberg, already posting to her Instagram story. "This is insane. Wait till my dad sees this, he's literally on the hospital board that approved Carter's leg design." More phones appeared. More cameras. More evidence of Logan Carter's ultimate humiliation spreading across social media at light speed. The irony was devastating. Logan's father owned the company that manufactured his prosthetic. Carter Biomedical had charged insurance companies millions for revolutionary mobility solutions. Yet here lay the CEO's own son, completely helpless, his $1 million leg sparking and twitching like a dying robot. "Somebody help him up," a teacher shouted from across the courtyard, but she was too far away. The crowd of students formed a perfect circle around Logan, phones recording every second of his misery. Logan closed his eyes, wishing he could disappear. Wishing the ground would swallow him whole. Wishing he'd never been born into this golden prison where money bought everything except dignity. What you're about to witness will shock you to your core. A billionaire's disabled son, tortured by the very people meant to protect him, until one brave girl did something that changed everything. But before we reveal what she did, like this video, subscribe, and comment below where you are watching from, because what happens next will blow your mind. 3 years ago, his mother had died in a car crash that also crushed Logan's left leg beyond repair. His father, drowning in grief and guilt, had thrown money at the problem. The best doctors, the most advanced prosthetics, the finest rehabilitation centers money could buy. But money couldn't buy courage. Money couldn't buy friends. And money definitely couldn't buy the ability to fight back when rich bullies decided to destroy you for sport. Logan opened his eyes to find dozens of cameras still recording. His humiliation was being broadcast live to the children of the most powerful families in America. Tomorrow, it would be on every social platform. His weakness, his brokenness, his complete and utter helplessness, immortalized forever. The future billionaire, heir to a pharmaceutical empire, reduced to a broken toy for the entertainment of his peers. And then, cutting through the laughter like a sword through silk, came a voice that would change everything. Get away from him right now. Nobody saw her coming. Nobody expected what happened next. But Zoe Parker was about to do the unthinkable. The girl came from nowhere. Logan's vision was still blurred from hitting the marble, his ears ringing from the impact, when this tornado in a too-big blazer bulldozed through the circle of phones and pointing fingers. She wasn't part of their world. Hell, she wasn't even supposed to exist at Whitmore Academy. Her uniform was wrong, blazer sleeves rolled up because it was 3 sizes too large, skirt that had seen better decades, shoes that screamed, thrift store warrior. Everything about her announced scholarship kid in capital letters. But her eyes? Her eyes burned like she owned the place. Back the hell up, she screamed at Bryce Hawthorne, all 5'0" of her squaring up against the lacrosse captain like David facing Goliath with a serious attitude adjustment. The crowd went dead silent. This wasn't how the food chain worked at Whitmore. Poor kids stayed invisible. Rich kids ruled everything. The natural order of the universe. Except nobody told this girl the rules. Excuse me? Bryce's voice dripped with the kind of entitled shock reserved for people who'd never been challenged by anyone earning less than 7 figures. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? Yeah, she shot back, stepping closer instead of backing down. I'm talking to a coward who gets his kicks beating up disabled kids. The words hit the courtyard like a hand grenade. Disabled kids. She'd said it out loud. The thing everyone whispered about but never acknowledged directly. Logan's brokenness, his otherness, his fundamental wrongness, laid bare for everyone to hear. But she didn't say it like an insult. She said it like an accusation. Listen, street rat, Preston sneered, pulling out his phone to record this spectacular social suicide. You clearly don't understand the situation here. That's Logan Carter. His family could buy your entire neighborhood and turn it into a parking lot. And you just publicly humiliated their son on camera, she fired back without missing a beat. Real smart, genius. I'm sure Daddy Carter's going to love seeing his disabled child get tortured for Instagram likes. Something shifted in the crowd. Phones that had been eagerly recording Logan's misery suddenly lowered. The viral moment they'd been capturing wasn't just entertainment anymore, it was evidence. Evidence of 50 privileged teenagers destroying the heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. Evidence that could end college dreams, destroy family reputations, topple political careers. Delete those videos, the girl commanded with shocking authority. All of them. Right now. You can't tell us what to do, Brittany Vanderberg protested, but her voice lacked its usual venom. Watch me. The girl knelt beside Logan, her fierce expression melting into something gentler. Hey, she said softly. Can you hear me? Logan stared up at this impossible person who just declared war on his behalf. Nobody had ever fought for him. Nobody had ever cared enough to risk everything. Who are you? He whispered. She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. I'm Zoe Parker. And you, Logan Carter, just got yourself a bodyguard. Zoe Parker wasn't supposed to exist. Not at Whitmore Academy. Not in Logan's world. Not anywhere in the carefully constructed universe where billionaires' children learn to inherit empires while stepping on anyone beneath them. But here she was, kneeling on cold marble beside a broken boy, examining his shattered prosthetic like she actually knew what she was looking at. This is military-grade titanium, she murmured, running her fingers along the twisted metal with surprising expertise. Custom neural interface, probably cost more than my mama's car. But whoever calibrated the joint servos did a garbage job. Logan stared at her in shock. How do you know that? My mama fixes everything that moves, Zoe replied, pulling a small toolkit from her backpack. Cars, motorcycles, industrial equipment. Turns out mechanical engineering is mechanical engineering, whether it's got wheels or walks around. She worked with practiced efficiency, realigning bent components and reconnecting severed wires. Her hands moved like a surgeon's, precise, confident, completely unintimidated by technology that cost more than most people's houses. There, she said, sitting back on her heels. It's not pretty, but it'll get you to the nurse's office without sparking like a broken toaster. Logan tested the leg carefully. The pain was still there, it was always there, but the joint moved smoothly again. The electronic whining had stopped. Why? He asked quietly. Why what? Why did you help me? You don't even know me. Zoe's expression grew serious. I know enough. I know you've been eating lunch alone for 2 years. I know you flinch every time someone walks behind you. I know you're in pain but you pretend you're not because rich kids aren't supposed to be broken. Each observation hit Logan like a physical blow. She'd seen everything, all the carefully hidden truths he thought nobody noticed. I also know, she continued, that you've got the saddest eyes I've ever seen on a 12-year-old. And that's saying something, because I've seen plenty of sad kids where I come from. Where do you come from? Riverside Projects. South side of the city. The place your family's politicians promise to clean up during election years but never actually visit. She said it without bitterness, just simple fact. Mama works 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I'm here on a full scholarship because I tested off the charts in math and science. Logan absorbed this information, trying to reconcile the fierce warrior who just destroyed Bryce Hawthorne with a girl from the projects who needed scholarships to attend school. Your mother must be proud, he said. Zoe's smile was radiant. She is. She says education is the one thing nobody can take away from you once you've got it. She's saving every penny to send me to MIT someday. What about your father? The smile flickered. He left when I was 6. Mama says some people aren't built for the long fight. Logan understood abandonment. His father had checked out emotionally the day Logan's mother died, leaving him to navigate grief and disability alone. But you are, he said. Built for the long fight. Zoe's grin returned, fierce and unshakable. Damn right I am. Logan's prosthetic screamed every time he took a step. Not metaphorically. Literally screamed, a high-pitched electronic whine that cut through the marble hallways of Whitmore Academy like a dental drill through bone. Jesus, Zoe winced as they walked toward the nurse's office. That sound is straight from hell. How long has it been doing that? 6 months, Logan admitted, his face flushing with embarrassment. Maybe longer. 6 months. Zoe stopped dead in the hallway, her voice echoing off polished walls lined with portraits of dead philanthropists. Logan, that's not normal. That's your leg telling you something seriously wrong. Victoria says it's just adjustment pains. Growing pains. She says I need to toughen up. Who's Victoria? My stepmother. She runs the medical division of my father's company. Logan's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She says the leg is fine. That I'm being dramatic. Zoe's eyes narrowed with laser focus. Your stepmother runs the medical division of Carter Biomedical. Yeah. She oversees all prosthetic development and approval. She personally signed off on my current model. Something dangerous flickered across Zoe's face, the same expression she'd worn right before slapping Bryce Hawthorne into next week. Logan, she said slowly, I need you to think very carefully about what I'm about to ask you. When was the last time you saw a doctor who wasn't connected to your family's company? Logan's steps faltered. The question hit him like ice water. What do you mean? Independent medical opinion. Someone who doesn't work for Carter Biomedical, doesn't get paid by your family, doesn't owe your stepmother any favors. When? Logan's mind raced backward through 3 years of medical appointments. Dr. Reynolds at Carter Medical Center. Dr. Hassan at Carter Rehabilitation Facility. Dr. Chen at Carter Prosthetics Laboratory. All Carter employees. All Victoria's subordinates. All people whose paychecks depended on keeping the boss happy. Never, he whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Every doctor I've seen works for us. Zoe's expression went absolutely nuclear. Logan, do you understand what you just told me? You're the heir to an $8 billion pharmaceutical fortune, and the woman controlling your medical care has a direct financial interest in keeping your treatment costs low. The hallway seemed to tilt sideways. Logan grabbed the wall for support, his prosthetic sending fresh waves of agony up his leg. She wouldn't, she's my stepmother. She married my father. She loves me. Does she? Zoe's voice was gentle but unforgiving. Or does she love controlling your father's fortune? Because if something happened to you, if you were declared medically unfit or mentally unstable, who do you think inherits everything? Logan's world shattered like glass. For 3 years, he'd blamed himself for the pain. For being weak. For not healing fast enough, not adapting well enough, not being grateful enough for the perfectly adequate prosthetic Victoria had chosen. Can you believe what Victoria has been doing to Logan? If this story is making your blood boil, smash that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what you would do if you discovered someone was torturing a disabled child for profit. But hold on, because what happens next will blow your mind completely. But what if the problem wasn't him? What if the problem was the woman who'd convinced everyone, including Logan himself, that his suffering was normal? We need to get you to a real doctor, Zoe said grimly. Right now. The nurse's office at Whitmore Academy looked like a 5-star medical spa. Leather examination chairs that cost more than cars. Digital diagnostic equipment that belonged in major hospitals. Everything pristine, sterile, and absolutely useless for what Zoe had in mind. Mrs. Hendricks isn't here, Logan observed, noting the empty desk where the school nurse usually sat. She's probably at lunch. Perfect. Zoe moved toward the filing cabinets like a woman on a mission. We need your medical records. All of them. Zoe, we can't just. Can't what? Look at your own medical files. She rattled the cabinet handle. Locked, obviously. Logan, you're 12 years old and you've been in constant pain for 6 months. Either your stepmother is criminally negligent, or she's doing this on purpose. Logan felt sick. The possibility that Victoria might be deliberately keeping him in pain was too horrible to consider. But the evidence was mounting like a prosecution case. There, Zoe pointed to a computer terminal. School nurses have to log into the district medical database to access student health records. If Mrs. Hendricks is still logged in. She wiggled the mouse. The screen came alive, displaying the Whitmore Academy Health Portal. Zoe, this is illegal. So is medical malpractice. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with shocking speed. What's your student ID number? I can't let you. Logan. She turned to face him, her expression dead serious. I've been watching you for 3 days. You wince every time you stand up. You hold your breath when you walk. You eat lunch alone because you're afraid people will notice how much pain you're in. Logan's throat tightened. She'd seen everything. Every carefully hidden moment of agony. My mama taught me that sometimes you have to break small rules to expose big crimes, Zoe continued. So I'm asking you one more time, what's your student ID? Logan stared at her for a long moment. This girl who'd appeared from nowhere. This impossible person who cared more about his well-being than his own family seemed to. 4471, he whispered. Zoe's fingers danced across the keys. The screen filled with Logan's medical history, 3 years of doctor visits, diagnostic reports, treatment recommendations. And then she found it. Holy shit, she breathed, her face going pale. What? Logan, look at this. She pointed to a diagnostic report dated 8 months ago. Dr. Martinez at Children's Hospital, that's not a Carter facility, recommended immediate prosthetic replacement. Severe socket degradation causing tissue damage and nerve compression. Logan leaned closer, his heart pounding. But look at this. Zoe scrolled to the next document. Victoria overruled the recommendation. She wrote, patient shows signs of drug-seeking behavior and psychological dependence on medical attention. Current prosthetic adequate for daily function. The words hit Logan like a sledgehammer. Drug-seeking behavior. Psychological dependence. Victoria hadn't just ignored his pain. She'd actively covered it up. She'd convinced every doctor in the Carter medical system that Logan was lying, manipulating, faking his suffering for attention. She's been poisoning them against me, he whispered. Zoe's voice was pure steel, we're going to destroy her. The Carter mansion sat on 12 acres of manicured perfection, but Logan had never felt more trapped. Victoria was waiting in the marble foyer when he limped through the front door, her Louboutin heels clicking against Italian stone like a countdown timer to execution. You're 17 minutes late, she said without looking up from her tablet. The physical therapy appointment was scheduled for 4:30. I was at school. With a friend. The word friend hung in the air like a foreign concept. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched with surgical precision. Friend? She finally looked at him, her ice-blue eyes scanning his disheveled uniform, the grass stains on his blazer, the slight smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. Logan, we've discussed this. Your condition makes normal social relationships complicated. There it was. The poison wrapped in silk. Your condition. Like he was a disease to be managed rather than a child to be loved. Her name is Zoe Parker, Logan said, surprised by his own boldness. She's really smart. She helped me fix my prosthetic when it malfunctioned today. Victoria's tablet slipped slightly in her manicured grip. Malfunctioned? The Carter Model 7 doesn't malfunction, Logan. Perhaps you were being too aggressive in your activities. It broke completely. Sparked and everything. But Zoe knew exactly how to repair it. This. Zoe. Victoria's voice could have frozen hell. She's a student at Whitmore. Scholarship student. From the Riverside Projects. The change in Victoria's expression was microscopic but deadly, like watching a snake decide whether to strike. She set down her tablet with the careful precision of someone placing a loaded gun on a table. I see. 2 words that contained volumes of calculation. Logan, I think we need to discuss appropriate social boundaries. Your father's position requires certain considerations. What kind of considerations? Victoria moved closer, her designer perfume, something that probably cost more than most families' rent, filling the space between them like chemical warfare. People from certain backgrounds, she said delicately, often befriend children like you for reasons that aren't entirely pure. Your trust fund, your future inheritance, your family's connections. Logan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Zoe doesn't care about money. Oh, sweetheart. Victoria's smile was razor-sharp kindness. They never appear to care. That's what makes them dangerous. She placed one perfectly manicured hand on his shoulder, a gesture that looked maternal but felt like ownership. I'm scheduling you for additional psychological evaluation next week. Dr. Reeves thinks you might be developing attachment disorders. It's not uncommon for children with disabilities to become overly dependent on anyone who shows them attention. Attachment disorders. Another poison label to explain away his humanity. Logan stared at his stepmother, this woman who controlled his medical care, his social life, his very perception of reality, and realized with crystal clarity what Zoe had seen immediately. Victoria wasn't protecting him. She was isolating him. And every day he stayed in this marble prison, she was stealing another piece of his soul. 3:17 a.m. Logan's prosthetic felt like it was eating him alive. The pain had evolved beyond anything he'd experienced before, white-hot needles shooting from his residual limb straight into his spine, making sleep impossible. He'd been awake for 6 hours, biting down on his pillow to muffle the sounds that wanted to tear from his throat. Carter, men don't cry. Victoria's voice echoed in his head even in the darkness. He limped to his bathroom, each step sending fresh waves of agony through his body. In the mirror, his reflection looked like a ghost, pale skin, dark circles under his eyes, the hollow look of someone fighting a war nobody else could see. The prosthetic socket was cutting into his skin. Again. Logan peeled away the liner to find fresh blood seeping from pressure sores that had developed over the past weeks. The artificial limb that was supposed to give him freedom had become his torturer. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands. The screen was too bright in the darkness, making his eyes water as he scrolled through his contacts. One name glowed like a lifeline, Zoe Parker. His finger hovered over her number. It was past 3 a.m. Normal people were asleep. Normal people didn't text strangers about their mutilated bodies in the middle of the night. But the pain was making him crazy. Making him desperate. Can't sleep. Leg is really bad, asterisk. He hit send before he could change his mind. The response came back in 30 seconds, how bad? Bleeding. Feels like it's on fire, asterisk. Photo, asterisk. Logan stared at the message. She wanted photographic evidence of his damage, his brokenness, his fundamental wrongness. But something about Zoe's directness cut through his shame. She didn't want to see his wound out of morbid curiosity. She wanted proof. He took the photo, clinical, unflinching documentation of what his perfectly adequate prosthetic was doing to his body. Her response was immediate, asterisk Jesus Christ, Logan. That's severe tissue necrosis. You need a hospital right now, asterisk. Can't. Victoria will just call Dr. Chen. He'll say it's normal, asterisk. It's not normal. It's criminal, asterisk. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Zoe was typing something, deleting it, trying again. Finally, asterisk meet me tomorrow after school. Behind the library. I'm bringing someone, asterisk. Who, asterisk. Someone who's going to help us burn Victoria's world to the ground, asterisk. Logan stared at his phone, his heart pounding despite the constant pain. For 3 years, he'd accepted Victoria's version of reality, that his suffering was normal, that his complaints were weakness, that his body was simply defective. But Zoe saw something different. She saw evidence of a crime. The prosthetic sent another spike of agony through his leg, and Logan gritted his teeth against a scream. But for the first time in months, the pain came with something else. Hope. Because tomorrow, he wouldn't be fighting alone anymore. Tomorrow, the war for his life would finally begin. And Victoria Blackstone Carter had no idea what was coming for her. The woman sitting beside Zoe behind the library looked like she could dismantle governments with a spreadsheet. Attorney Margaret Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen from Carter Medical, wore a sharp business suit and carried herself with the lethal confidence of someone who'd never lost a case she cared about winning. Logan Carter, she said, extending a firm handshake. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Logan glanced nervously at Zoe, who was practically vibrating with barely contained energy. Zoe, what's going on? What's going on, Margaret interrupted, is that you're being systematically abused by people who've sworn to protect you. And we're going to prove it. She opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. I've spent the last 18 hours digging into your medical history. What I found makes my skin crawl. Margaret spread documents across the stone bench like dealing cards. Dr. Martinez at Children's Hospital recommended prosthetic replacement 8 months ago. Dr. Patterson at Methodist suggested psychological counseling for chronic pain management 6 months ago. Dr. Williams at University Hospital flagged possible medical neglect 4 months ago. Logan's world tilted. I never saw any of those doctors. Exactly. Margaret's voice was razor-sharp. But your insurance was billed for consultations with all of them. Someone has been systematically scheduling appointments, collecting professional recommendations, then burying them. Victoria, Logan breathed. Victoria Blackstone Carter, Chief Medical Officer of Carter Biomedical, who coincidentally controls your healthcare decisions and stands to inherit everything if you're declared medically unfit or... Margaret paused meaningfully. Or what? Or if you die from complications related to medical neglect. The words hit Logan like physical blows. Zoe reached over and squeezed his hand, her grip fierce and warm. There's more, Margaret continued relentlessly. Your prosthetic isn't just inadequate, it's been deliberately downgraded. The Carter Model 7 you're wearing? It's actually a modified Model 3 with updated casing. Your insurance approved a top-tier neural interface prosthetic that costs $180,000. You're wearing a $15,000 piece of junk painted to look expensive. Logan stared at his artificial leg with new horror. She's been stealing from my medical care. She's been killing you by inches while pocketing the difference. Margaret's tone could cut diamond. Logan, you're not just a victim of medical malpractice. You're the target of a deliberate murder conspiracy disguised as stepmother love. The world went silent except for Logan's heartbeat thundering in his ears. Everything made sense now, the constant pain, the dismissive doctors, Victoria's insistence that he was overdramatic about his suffering. She wasn't protecting him from the world. She was protecting the world from finding out what she was doing to him. "What do we do?" he whispered. Margaret smiled, and it was absolutely terrifying. "We document everything. We get you real medical care. And then we destroy her in court so thoroughly that she'll be lucky to get a job cleaning bedpans at a veterinary clinic." Zoe squeezed his hand tighter. "You ready for this fight?" Logan looked at these two warriors who'd appeared in his life like avenging angels. "Let's burn it all down." Dr. Sarah Kim's office didn't look like the other sterile medical facilities Logan had grown accustomed to. Books lined the walls instead of pharmaceutical advertisements. Plants grew in actual sunlight streaming through real windows. The examination table was padded with something that felt like comfort instead of cold efficiency. "Logan," Dr. Kim said, reviewing the file Margaret had compiled, "I need you to understand something before we begin. Everything that happens in this room is confidential. Your stepmother cannot access these records. Your father's company has no influence here. This is your medical care, controlled by you." Logan had never heard those words before. Medical care controlled by him, not Victoria, not Carter Biomedical, not anyone with a financial interest in keeping him broken. "Now," Dr. Kim continued, "I want you to tell me about your pain. Not what anyone else has told you about your pain, what you experience." The invitation hung in the air like a lifeline. Logan had spent 3 years being told his pain wasn't real, wasn't severe, wasn't worth addressing. Now someone was asking him to describe it in his own words. "It's like my leg is screaming," he said quietly. "Every step feels like walking on broken glass. The socket cuts into my skin until it bleeds. Sometimes the pain is so bad I can't think about anything else." Dr. Kim nodded, making notes without judgment or dismissal. "How long has this been going on?" 8 months. Maybe longer. "And when you've reported this pain, what were you told?" Logan's voice got smaller. "That it was normal. That I needed to toughen up. That I was being dramatic." Dr. Kim's pen stopped moving. Her expression darkened. "Logan, chronic pain that interferes with daily function is never normal. Pain that causes tissue damage is never acceptable. Anyone who told you otherwise was lying." The words hit Logan like a revelation. Not mistaken. Not misinformed. Lying. "Let's examine your prosthetic," Dr. Kim said gently. Logan removed his artificial leg with practiced efficiency, then peeled away the liner. Dr. Kim's sharp intake of breath told him everything. "Dear God," she whispered, staring at the pressure sores, the bleeding tissue, the obvious signs of chronic injury. "Logan, this is severe medical neglect. How long have you been walking on wounds like this?" "Months." Dr. Kim was already reaching for her phone. "I'm calling the hospital. You need immediate intervention, infection screening, tissue debridement, proper prosthetic fitting. This should have been addressed the moment it started." "But Victoria says." "Victoria is either criminally incompetent or deliberately harming you," Dr. Kim interrupted with surgical precision. "Either way, she has no business controlling your medical care." She photographed Logan's injuries with clinical thoroughness, documenting evidence that would make Victoria's lies impossible to maintain. "Logan," Dr. Kim said, meeting his eyes directly, "I've been practicing medicine for 15 years. What's been done to you isn't healthcare. It's torture disguised as treatment." For the first time in 3 years, Logan heard a medical professional tell him the truth. He wasn't broken. He was being broken. And that was going to stop. Today. The abandoned classroom on Whitmore's 3rd floor had become their secret headquarters. Margaret spread evidence across 3 desks like a general planning an invasion. Medical records, insurance documents, photographs of Logan's injuries, each piece of paper another nail in Victoria's coffin. "This is bigger than we thought," Margaret announced, her voice echoing in the empty room. "Victoria hasn't just been neglecting Logan's care. She's been running a systematic insurance fraud operation using his medical needs as cover." Zoe looked up from her laptop, where she'd been cross-referencing medical billing codes. "What kind of fraud?" "The expensive kind. Look at this." Margaret held up a billing statement. "Victoria has been charging your insurance $180,000 for a top-tier prosthetic while giving you a $15,000 piece of junk. She's pocketed the $165,000 difference." Logan felt sick. "She's been stealing from my medical care to make money. It gets worse. She's done this 17 times over the past 3 years. Physical therapy sessions you never received, specialist consultations that never happened, medical equipment that was never delivered. Conservative estimate: she's embezzled over $2.3 million from your healthcare accounts." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. "But here's the beautiful part," Margaret continued with predatory satisfaction. "Insurance fraud is a federal crime. The FBI takes this very seriously, especially when it involves disabled minors." Zoe's fingers flew across her keyboard. "I've been digging into Carter Biomedical's other pediatric prosthetic cases. Want to guess what I found?" Logan dreaded the answer. 17 other kids with the same pattern. Expensive prosthetics ordered, cheap ones delivered, medical complaints dismissed as psychological issues. Victoria's been running this scam across your father's entire customer base. Margaret's smile could have powered a small city. "That's not medical malpractice anymore. That's organized criminal enterprise. RICO violation, conspiracy charges, wire fraud across state lines." "How many years in prison?" Logan asked quietly. "If we can prove intent." 20 to life. Federal judges don't play games with people who torture disabled children for profit. Logan stared at the evidence of his systematic destruction spread across those desks. 3 years of pain, isolation, and gaslighting, all so Victoria could buy herself another yacht. "There's something else," Zoe said, her voice unusually hesitant. "I hacked into Victoria's personal email account." "Zoe," Margaret warned. "I know it's illegal, but look at this." She turned her laptop screen toward them. "Email to Dr. Chen from 6 months ago, continue current treatment protocol for Logan Carter. Pain complaints are attention-seeking behavior. Under no circumstances authorize prosthetic upgrade or psychiatric evaluation. Patient must remain medically dependent." The room went dead silent. Medically dependent. Victoria hadn't just been stealing money. She'd been deliberately keeping Logan broken, helpless, trapped in a cycle of pain and isolation that made him easier to control. "She's not just a thief," Logan whispered. "She's a predator." Margaret's voice was pure steel, "and we're about to feed her to the wolves." Richard Carter's private office occupied the entire 47th floor of the Carter Biomedical Tower, but it had never felt smaller. Logan sat across from his father's mahogany desk, a piece of furniture worth more than most people's cars, watching the most powerful man he knew crumble like ancient paper. "These documents," Richard said, his voice hollow as he flipped through Margaret's evidence folder. "These billing records. Victoria authorized all of this. Every single fraudulent charge," Margaret confirmed from her chair beside Logan. "Your wife has been systematically embezzling from your son's medical care for 3 years." Richard's hands trembled as he examined photographs of Logan's infected wounds. The same hands that had built a pharmaceutical empire, that had shaken hands with presidents, that had signed billion-dollar deals, shaking like autumn leaves. "My God, Logan," he whispered. "How long have you been in this kind of pain?" Logan had dreamed of this moment for years, his father finally seeing him, finally understanding. But now that it was happening, he felt nothing but hollow exhaustion. Since the accident, Dad. Since the day you married her and stopped looking at me. The words hit Richard like physical blows. I thought. Victoria said you were adjusting well. She said the prosthetic was working perfectly. She said. She lied. Logan's voice was steady now, strengthened by weeks of Zoe's fierce loyalty and Margaret's unwavering support. About everything. The pain, the medical reports, the insurance claims. All of it. Richard stood and walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city his company helped heal. The other families, he said quietly. Margaret mentioned 17 other children. 17 other disabled kids whose medical care Victoria was stealing from, Margaret said without mercy. 17 other families who trusted Carter Biomedical to help their children, only to have your wife torture them for profit. Richard aged 10 years in 10 seconds. What do you need from me? Everything, Margaret replied. Full access to Carter Biomedical's billing records, medical files, correspondence between Victoria and the medical staff. We need to document the entire criminal enterprise. And Victoria? Suspended immediately. All medical decision-making authority revoked. Logan needs real healthcare, not whatever sadistic game your wife has been playing. Richard pressed a button on his desk phone. Security, I need Victoria Blackstone Carter escorted from the building immediately. Revoke all access credentials and change the security codes. Logan watched his father take control with the same ruthless efficiency that had built their fortune. For 3 years, Richard had been absent, checked out, leaving Logan to navigate Victoria's psychological warfare alone. But now, faced with undeniable evidence of what his wife had done to his son, Richard Carter was finally waking up. Logan, his father said, turning from the windows with tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry. I failed you in every way a father can fail his child. For the first time in 3 years, Logan saw his real father looking back at him. Help me fix this, Logan said simply. Richard nodded grimly. We're going to destroy her. Victoria's designer heels clicked against marble like bullets hitting stone as security escorted her through the Carter Biomedical lobby. Every employee in the building watched the chief medical officer's perp walk, whispers spreading like wildfire as the woman who terrorized staff meetings for 3 years got marched toward the exit by uniformed guards. Logan stood at the elevator bank with his father and Margaret, watching justice unfold in real time. Richard. Victoria's voice carried across the lobby, sharp with desperation. What is the meaning of this? I demand an explanation. Richard stepped forward, his face carved from granite. The meaning, Victoria, is that your criminal enterprise is over. Her perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment, long enough for Logan to see pure panic flash across her features before the cold control reasserted itself. I have no idea what you're talking about. $2.3 million in insurance fraud, Margaret announced loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. Systematic medical abuse of disabled minors. Federal charges being filed as we speak. Victoria's gaze swept the crowd of watching employees, calculating damage control with the speed of someone whose survival depended on manipulation. This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding, she said smoothly. I've dedicated my career to helping children like Logan. Everything I've done has been in his best medical interests. Logan had heard that voice for 3 years, reasonable, authoritative, absolutely convinced of its own righteousness. The voice that had gaslighted him into believing his agony was normal, his complaints were weakness, his need for help was shameful. But he wasn't that broken, silent boy anymore. Show them, Logan said quietly to Margaret. Margaret held up the photographs of Logan's infected wounds, turning them so the entire lobby could see. Gasps echoed off marble walls as 50 employees got their first look at what their chief medical officer had done to the CEO's son. This, Margaret announced, is what Victoria Blackstone Carter calls, best medical interests. Victoria's composure finally shattered. You don't understand the complexities of pediatric prosthetics. Logan has psychological issues that complicate his treatment. I've been protecting him from proper medical care, Richard interrupted, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. From pain relief. From basic human decency. Security reached the lobby doors. Victoria turned back one final time, her ice blue eyes locking onto Logan's with pure hatred. You ungrateful little cripple, she hissed, her mask falling away completely. I gave you everything. Structure, discipline, purpose. Without me, you're nothing but a broken boy playing victim. The words that once would have destroyed Logan now bounced off him like bullets off steel. Without you, Logan replied clearly, I'm free. The lobby doors closed behind Victoria Blackstone Carter, cutting off her protests mid-syllable. Logan watched through glass as security loaded her into a waiting car, probably heading straight to FBI headquarters for questioning. 3 years of torture. Over. The real healing could finally begin. The new prosthetic felt like magic. Logan took his first steps in the Carter biomedical testing lab, and for the first time in 3 years, walking didn't hurt. The neural interface responded to his thoughts like an extension of his own body. The socket fit perfectly, cushioned with materials that felt like silk against his skin. How's the balance? Dr. Kim asked, monitoring his gait from behind a bank of computers displaying real-time biomechanical data. It's like. Logan paused, searching for words to describe the impossible. Like I remember walking before the accident. Like my leg is actually mine again. Zoe whooped from her perch on the examination table. Look at you go, speed racer. Logan grinned and broke into a jog, something he hadn't attempted in years. The prosthetic's advanced hydraulics absorbed impact seamlessly, propelling him forward with fluid efficiency. He'd forgotten what it felt like to run without pain. The Model 12 neural interface, Dr. Kim explained to Richard, who was watching his son with tears streaming down his face, represents the absolute cutting edge of prosthetic technology. Direct nerve integration, predictive movement algorithms, haptic feedback sensors that actually let him feel texture and temperature. How much does it cost? Richard asked. For anyone else? About $400,000. For Logan? Priceless. Logan stopped jogging and turned to face his father. Dad, I can feel the floor. Like, actually feel it through the prosthetic. Cold marble, warm carpet, rough concrete, everything. Richard wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. All those years, I thought Victoria was giving you the best care money could buy. I thought I was protecting you by trusting her medical expertise. You didn't know, Logan said simply. She fooled everyone. I should have known. I should have seen what she was doing to you. Zoe jumped down from the examination table and walked over to Richard. Mr. Carter, can I tell you something? Richard nodded, still overwhelmed by watching his son move without pain for the first time since the accident. Logan never once blamed you, Zoe said. Not once. Even when he was hurting so bad he couldn't sleep, even when Victoria was gaslighting him into thinking he was crazy, he never said a single word against you. She paused, letting that sink in. But he's been waiting 3 years for you to see him. Really see him. Not the broken kid who needed fixing, but Logan, your son who's brave enough to walk through hell and still smile when someone shows him kindness. Richard looked at Logan, who was experimenting with the prosthetic's advanced balance systems, laughing as he performed movements that would have been impossible with the torture device Victoria had forced him to wear. I see you now, Richard said quietly. And I'm never looking away again. Logan's smile could have powered the entire medical center. For the first time since his mother died, the Carter family was whole. The story exploded across the internet like a nuclear bomb at midnight. Logan woke up to his phone buzzing with notifications, hundreds of them, pouring in faster than he could read. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts, news app updates, all screaming the same impossible headline. Billionaire's wife tortured disabled son for profit ***. Zoe was already at his bedroom window, having climbed the oak tree that grew beside his second-floor room, a skill she'd apparently learned during her project's childhood. "Logan, you need to see this," she said, scrambling through the window with her laptop balanced precariously in one hand. The screen showed a news article from the Washington Post, complete with photographs of Logan's infected wounds and copies of Victoria's fraudulent billing records. But it wasn't just one article. It was everywhere. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, BBC, Reuters, every major news outlet had picked up the story. Social media was on fire with hashtags, hashtag Justice for Logan, hashtag Victoria Carter, hashtag Disability Rights. How did this happen so fast? Logan asked, scrolling through an endless stream of coverage. Margaret. Zoe's grin was absolutely feral. She didn't just file criminal charges. She sent press packages to every major news organization simultaneously. Complete with medical records, financial documents, and those photos Dr. Kim took of your injuries. Logan's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Don't answer," Zoe warned. "That's probably a reporter. They've been calling everyone, your classmates, your neighbors, even my mama down in the projects." Logan stared at his phone in disbelief. "This is insane." "This is justice," Zoe corrected. "Victoria spent 3 years making sure nobody knew what she was doing to you. Now the whole world knows." She pulled up Twitter on her laptop. The trending topics made Logan's head spin. Hashtag Victoria Carter, 2.3 M tweets. Hashtag medical abuse, 1.8 M tweets. Hashtag Carter Biomedical, 1.2 M tweets. Hashtag disabled rights, 950k tweets. "Look at this," Zoe said, clicking on a video that had already been viewed 5 million times. It showed Victoria being escorted from the Carter building by security, her face twisted with rage as reporters shouted questions. The comments were savage. "How do you torture a disabled child for money and sleep at night?" Asterisk. "This woman is a monster in designer clothing." Asterisk. "That poor boy suffered for years while she bought yachts with his medical funds." Asterisk. "Death penalty for child abusers." Period. Asterisk. Logan's bedroom door burst open. Richard stood there in his pajamas, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing," his father said. "CNN wants an exclusive interview. The FBI wants to schedule your testimony." The stock market opened down 18% because of Carter Biomedical's connection to the scandal. Logan looked from his father to Zoe, both of them waiting for his reaction. For 3 years, Victoria had kept him silent, hidden, ashamed of his pain. Now his story was literally changing the world. "Good," Logan said simply. "Let them all know what she did." The war was over. Logan had won. Federal Judge Patricia Hammond's courtroom felt like a cathedral built for the worship of justice. Soaring ceilings, mahogany panels that gleamed like polished bronze, and an atmosphere so heavy with legal gravity that whispers carried like thunder. This was where careers died and legends were born. Victoria sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with her platinum blonde hair. No designer suits, no Louboutin heels, no makeup artists to craft her mask of respectability. Just a woman who looked exactly like what she was, a criminal facing the full weight of federal prosecution. Logan entered the courtroom flanked by Margaret and his father, moving with fluid confidence on his new prosthetic. The press gallery exploded with camera flashes as he walked down the center aisle, not the broken, limping boy from Victoria's torture chamber, but a survivor who'd found his voice. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Hammond," the bailiff announced. Judge Hammond was legendary, a former prosecutor who'd built her reputation destroying white-collar criminals who preyed on vulnerable populations. She looked at Victoria with the expression of someone examining a particularly disgusting insect. "We are here today," Judge Hammond began, for the sentencing of Victoria Blackstone Carter, who has pleaded guilty to 17 counts of insurance fraud, medical malpractice, and child endangerment. But before I impose sentence, the court will hear victim impact statements. Margaret rose from her seat. Your Honor, Logan Carter would like to address the court. Logan had practiced this moment for weeks. He'd written speeches, memorized talking points, planned every word with surgical precision. But now, standing before this temple of justice, all those preparations evaporated. He looked directly at Victoria, who was staring at the table in front of her, refusing to meet his eyes. Victoria, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. Look at me. She didn't move. Look at me. Logan's voice cracked like a whip. Victoria's head snapped up, her ice blue eyes finally meeting his. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked afraid. For 3 years, you convinced me I was broken, Logan said, his words echoing off marble walls. You made me believe my pain was normal, my suffering was weakness, my need for help was shameful. You stole my childhood, my health, and my trust in the people who were supposed to protect me. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the courtroom. But you made one mistake, Victoria. You underestimated how much fight was left in this broken little boy. He gestured toward Zoe, sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face. You never counted on someone like Zoe Parker seeing through your lies. Someone brave enough to stand up to you when nobody else would. Logan's voice rose with newfound strength. I'm not broken anymore, Victoria. But you are. And now the whole world can see exactly what kind of monster hides behind designer clothes and pharmaceutical degrees. Victoria's mask finally cracked completely. She was sobbing. Judge Hammond's gavel hit the bench like a thunderclap from God. Victoria Blackstone Carter, she began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute moral authority, in 37 years on this bench, I have never encountered a case that so thoroughly represents the perversion of trust between caregiver and child. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporters had stopped typing, transfixed by the judicial reckoning unfolding before them. You took a grieving, disabled child and transformed his medical care into a personal ATM machine, Judge Hammond continued, her words precise as surgical instruments. You convinced doctors to ignore his suffering. You gaslit him into believing torture was treatment. You stole $2.3 million from his health care while he bled through infected bandages. Victoria sat motionless, her orange jumpsuit a stark reminder that her days of designer armor were over forever. But your crimes extend far beyond financial fraud. You committed systematic psychological warfare against a vulnerable minor. You isolated him from proper medical care, convinced him his agony was imaginary, and made him complicit in his own abuse by teaching him that asking for help was weakness. Logan felt Zoe's hand slip into his, her fingers warm and steady. Behind him, his father sat with tears streaming down his face, watching justice finally arrive for his son. The 17 other children you victimized through this criminal enterprise trusted your medical expertise. Their families paid millions for prosthetics that were deliberately inadequate, medical care that was intentionally substandard, and treatment protocols designed to maximize profit rather than healing. Judge Hammond leaned forward, her eyes boring into Victoria with laser intensity. You are a predator who weaponized medicine itself. You turned hospitals into hunting grounds and transformed prosthetics into instruments of torture. You perverted the sacred trust between doctor and patient into a mechanism for personal enrichment. The judge's voice rose like an Old Testament prophet declaring divine judgment. Victoria Blackstone Carter, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will serve every single day of that sentence in maximum security, where you will have ample time to contemplate the lives you destroyed for yacht money. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Somewhere in the chaos, Logan heard Zoe whisper, yes, with fierce satisfaction. But Judge Hammond wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am ordering complete asset forfeiture. Every penny you stole, every luxury you purchased with blood money, every investment you made while children suffered, all of it will be liquidated and distributed to your victims' families for ongoing medical care. Victoria finally looked up, her face a mask of absolute devastation. Everything was gone, her freedom, her money, her reputation, her future. She would die in prison, remembered only as the monster who tortured disabled children for profit. "This court is adjourned," Judge Hammond declared. The gavel fell one final time, sealing Victoria's fate with the finality of a coffin lid slamming shut. Justice, Logan realized, sounded exactly like thunder. 6 months later, Logan Carter stood on the steps of the United States Capitol, facing a sea of cameras that stretched to the horizon. The Disabled Children's Medical Protection Act, nicknamed Logan's Law by every major news outlet, was about to become federal legislation. Congress had fast-tracked the bill after Logan's testimony before the House Subcommittee on Healthcare had gone viral with 47 million views. "Ladies and gentlemen," Logan said into the microphone, his voice carrying across the National Mall with crystal clarity, "6 months ago, I was a broken boy who believed his suffering was normal because the people controlling my medical care told me it was." Zoe stood beside him in her best dress, still secondhand, but pressed to perfection, beaming with pride as her best friend addressed the nation. "Victoria Blackstone Carter convinced me that chronic pain was weakness, that asking for help was shameful, that my disability made me a burden instead of a person deserving basic human dignity." Logan's new prosthetic caught the afternoon sunlight as he gestured, the advanced neural interface allowing him to move with fluid grace that would have been impossible under Victoria's torture regime. But here's what she never understood: broken things can be fixed. And sometimes, they come back stronger than before. The crowd of disability rights activists, congressional representatives, and media stretched for blocks. Logan had become the face of medical reform in America, the boy who transformed personal trauma into legislative victory. Logan's Law will require independent medical oversight for all pediatric disability cases. No more single point of failure healthcare where one person can torture children while collecting paychecks. No more insurance fraud disguised as medical treatment. No more kids suffering in silence because adults find their pain inconvenient. Margaret Chen stood at the edge of the crowd, watching her client deliver the speech that would cement his place in civil rights history. The woman who'd saved Logan's life had become his closest advisor, helping him navigate the complex world of legislative advocacy. Every disabled child in America will now have access to independent medical review, patient advocacy services, and legal protection from the kind of systematic abuse I endured for 3 years. Logan paused, his eyes finding his father in the crowd. Richard had testified alongside his son, publicly accepting responsibility for his failures while pledging Carter Biomedical's complete support for the new legislation. To every kid out there who's been told their pain doesn't matter, who's been gaslit into believing their suffering is normal, who's been made to feel broken and worthless by people who should protect them, I want you to know something. Logan's voice rose with passionate conviction. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not a burden. You are human beings deserving of dignity, respect, and medical care that actually heals instead of harms. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause that echoed off the Capitol dome. And if anyone tries to convince you otherwise, Logan concluded with a grin that could light up Washington, D.C., just remember, this broken boy helped change federal law. The phoenix had risen from the ashes. And he was magnificent. The letter arrived on a Tuesday that felt like destiny. Logan sat in his father's renovated office, no longer the sterile corporate shrine it had been during Victoria's reign, but a warm space filled with medical journals, patient advocacy materials, and photographs of the 17 children whose lives had been saved by Logan's Law. It's from Harvard Medical School, Margaret said, holding the envelope like it contained nuclear secrets. Pre-admission program for exceptional students interested in pediatric prosthetics and disability rights. Logan's hands trembled as he opened the letter. After everything, the torture, the courtroom battles, the congressional testimony, this felt impossibly surreal. Dear Mr. Carter, *. Your advocacy work and personal experience with systemic medical abuse have impressed our admissions committee. We would like to offer you early acceptance into our accelerated pre-medical program, beginning this fall, *. They want me to help design the next generation of prosthetic technology, Logan said, his voice barely above a whisper. And teach medical students about patient advocacy. Zoe launched herself across the room, tackling Logan in a hug that nearly knocked them both over. You're going to Harvard. My best friend is going to Harvard. We're going to Harvard, Logan corrected. MIT accepted your engineering application, remember? We'll be 20 minutes apart instead of 20 feet apart. Zoe's scholarship to MIT had surprised exactly nobody who knew her. The girl who jury-rigged a broken prosthetic behind a library had caught the attention of every major engineering school in the country. Richard entered the office carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the first genuine smile Logan had seen from his father since before the accident. The board approved your proposal, Richard announced. Carter Biomedical will establish the Logan Carter Foundation for Pediatric Medical Advocacy. Full funding, independent oversight, and you as the youngest board chairman in foundation history. Logan stared at his father. You're serious? Dead serious. The foundation will provide free legal advocacy, independent medical review, and emergency prosthetic services for any disabled child facing medical neglect. We're starting with a $50 million endowment. The number was staggering. $50 million dedicated to making sure no other child would endure what Logan had suffered. There's one more thing, Richard said quietly. I've been working with Congress on something special. He handed Logan an official-looking document with the presidential seal. Next month, you're receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Youngest recipient in American history. Logan looked around the room at the three people who'd saved his life. Margaret, who'd fought his legal battles. Zoe, who'd seen through Victoria's lies when nobody else would. His father, who'd finally found the courage to choose his son over corporate convenience. 3 years ago, Logan Carter had been a broken boy limping through life, convinced his suffering was normal. Now he was heading to Harvard, running a foundation, and receiving medals from presidents. But the greatest victory wasn't the accolades or the achievements. It was the simple fact that Logan Carter had learned to fly. And he was teaching others to soar. The White House Rose Garden had never hosted a ceremony quite like this one. Logan stood before President Williams, surrounded by disability rights activists, medical professionals, and the very congressional representatives who'd helped pass his landmark legislation. The Presidential Medal of Freedom gleamed in its presentation case, waiting to be placed around the neck of the youngest recipient in American history. But Logan's eyes weren't on the medal or the president or the cameras broadcasting this moment to millions of viewers worldwide. His eyes were locked on Victoria Blackstone Carter. She sat in the federal prison transport van parked just outside the White House gates, flanked by U.S. Marshals who'd brought her for maximum security for this unprecedented moment. Per Logan's personal request, and presidential approval, his tormentor would witness his ultimate triumph from behind bulletproof glass. Logan Carter, President Williams began, her voice carrying across the Rose Garden with ceremonial gravity, represents the absolute best of American courage and resilience. Faced with systematic abuse disguised as medical care, he didn't retreat into victimhood. He fought back with legal precision, moral clarity, and an unshakable determination to protect other vulnerable children. Logan could see Victoria's face through the van's window, a mask of pure hatred watching her former victim receive America's highest civilian honor. The woman who tried to break him was now witnessing his ascension to national hero status. The Logan Carter Foundation has already prevented 17 cases of medical abuse, provided emergency prosthetics to 43 children, and established independent medical advocacy in all 50 states. Logan's law has fundamentally transformed how America protects its most vulnerable citizens. The president lifted the medal from its case. But perhaps most remarkably, Logan has chosen forgiveness over revenge, healing over hatred, and hope over despair. Logan stepped forward, allowing President Williams to place the medal around his neck. The weight was surprisingly substantial, not just the gold and ribbon, but the responsibility it represented. "Logan," the president said quietly, "is there anything you'd like to say?" Logan looked out at the assembled crowd, then turned toward the transport van where Victoria sat in chains. He walked to the microphone with fluid grace, his advanced prosthetic moving like poetry in motion. "3 years ago, a woman convinced me that my pain didn't matter, that my voice didn't count, that my life had no value beyond what I could provide for her personal enrichment." His voice carried across the rose garden with crystal clarity. "She was wrong about everything except one thing: I am different. But different doesn't mean broken. Different doesn't mean worthless. Different means I see the world through eyes that have witnessed both humanity's cruelest darkness and its most radiant light." Logan's gaze found Victoria's through the bulletproof glass. "Victoria, you taught me something invaluable, that the most dangerous predators are often the people we trust most. But you also taught me that even the most damaged child can rise from ashes and transform pain into purpose." He touched the metal at his throat. "Thank you for underestimating me. It made victory so much sweeter." 5 years later, Logan Carter walked across the Harvard Medical School graduation stage without a single mechanical sound. The new biointegrated prosthetic he'd helped design moved like living tissue, responding to neural impulses so seamlessly that even he sometimes forgot where flesh ended and technology began. But the real transformation wasn't in his leg, it was in the young man who wore it. Dr. Logan Carter. The title still felt surreal. In the audience, Zoe Parker, now Dr. Zoe Parker, MIT's youngest ever PhD in biomedical engineering, cheered loud enough to wake the dead. Beside her sat Richard Carter, whose hair had gone completely silver but whose eyes blazed with pride that could power a small city. Margaret Chen had flown in from Washington, D.C., where she now headed the Department of Justice's Medical Crimes Division, a position created specifically after the Victoria Blackstone Carter case had exposed systemic abuse throughout America's healthcare system. "Ladies and gentlemen," the dean announced, "our valedictorian, Dr. Logan Carter, who will be joining us next year as our youngest ever assistant professor of pediatric prosthetics and medical ethics." Logan approached the podium, his movements fluid and confident. The scared, broken boy who'd once eaten lunch alone behind the library was gone forever, replaced by a man who'd turned personal trauma into revolutionary change. 5 years ago, Logan began, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "I was a victim. Today, I'm a doctor. Tomorrow, I'll be a teacher. But the title I'm most proud of is the one I've carried longest, survivor." He looked out at the sea of faces, graduating medical students who would soon hold other people's lives in their hands. "Every person in this room will one day encounter patients like I was, vulnerable, frightened, dependent on your expertise and compassion. You will have the power to heal or to harm, to build up or to tear down, to see human dignity or to see profit margins." Logan's hand unconsciously moved to his chest, where a small star-shaped button was pinned to his graduation gown, the same button Zoe had given him years ago as a symbol of hope and friendship. "I want to tell you something my best friend taught me when I was 12 years old and convinced I was irreparably broken: stars don't care if you limp. They shine anyway." He gestured toward the massive windows overlooking Harvard Yard, where late afternoon sunlight streamed through ancient oak trees. "You are all stars in the constellation of human healing. Some of you will shine quietly in small practices, bringing comfort to individual families. Others will blaze across research laboratories, discovering cures for diseases that don't yet have names. But all of you, every single one, have the power to look at a broken child and see not a burden, but a human being deserving of dignity, respect, and care that actually heals." Logan's voice rose with passionate conviction. "That's your sacred obligation as physicians. That's your promise to every patient who trusts you with their pain. That's your gift to a world that desperately needs healers instead of predators." He smiled, radiant and unshakable. "Now go shine." If Logan's story inspired you, like, subscribe, and share. Tell us in the comments, what's your biggest takeaway? Stars don't limp, they shine.